Today I'll be showing you how to change an idler pulley on a 2004 Toyota Tacoma with a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine. This will also apply on all 95 through 2004 Toyota Tacomas that use that 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine as well. Tools that you'll need will include a ratchet, a 6-inch extension for the ratchet, 14mm and 10mm wrenches, as well as 14mm and 10mm sockets. The replacement pulley that I'll be using is a Gates 38031. The first thing that I'll do whenever I'm doing anything under the hood is to remove the negative cable on the battery. In this case, it's a 10mm bolt holding it on. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the fan shroud from the radiator, and I'm doing this just to give myself a little bit of extra wiggle room when I go to remove the old pulley. This is done 2 of the bolts up here, these 2 bolts mount this line to the radiator, to the fan shroud, so you want to remove those. And then this line can be moved out of the way. There are 4 more bolts on the side of the fan shroud holding it to the radiator. You can see the 2 there, as well as on the other side, 2 there that I'm going to remove as well. There's 1. 2. 3. And 4. Alright, now you can see with those bolts removed, this will give me a little bit of wiggle room to move the fan shroud around so that I can get to that pulley bolt easier. So the pulley that we're going to be changing today is this one right here. This particular one is the power steering pump idler pulley. So it's connected to the same belt as the power steering pump is. So to get this off, I'm going to use my ratchet and 14mm. In this case, it's a deep socket. I'm going to go in behind the fan shroud in order to give myself a little bit of extra room. Once you get the bolt here out a little bit so it's not tightened onto the bracket, you want to move this bolt in order to release tension on the pulley so you can remove the pulley. So in order to do that, I'll take my 14mm socket with an extension so that I can reach down to that bolt. And in this case, I will turn it counterclockwise. The way that I like to think about it is that you're screwing this bolt out of the piece that's holding the pulley in. So that means the piece has to move that way, which will release tension on the belt. So now I have it pretty well loosened up. And you can see now have enough room, well, almost enough room, maybe just a loosen it a little more by hand. Again, I'm turning it counterclockwise to release the tension on the belt. And eventually you'll get it loose enough to where the belt will come off the pulley. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And just get the belt out of the way, but don't lose track of it. And then with the tension relieved, you can finish removing the pulley by loosening the front bolt. So the first thing you want to do when you get this out is make sure that you keep everything in order so you can inspect it and compare it to the new pulley and make sure that everything goes back on the same way. So I have here my old pulley and my new pulley. Couple of things to note. If you take apart this assembly, we have a shoulder washer and then the bolt that holds it on, and then we have this guard. This guard is actually not needed, and because of the slightly different dimensions of the new pulley, I've actually done one of these pulleys before. If you put this guard on and assemble it the same way as the old pulley, the guard will actually rub on the pulley itself, which is bad, so you don't want to include this. The reason for the guard being there, actually, as far as I can tell, is to keep water out and other debris out. The OEM pulley is actually not a sealed bearing type pulley, at least that's what I've read, whereas the Gates pulley that I'm replacing it with is. So it turns out this guard probably isn't needed anyway. So I'm just going to take the other hardware and install it in the same orientation on the new pulley, like this. You can probably keep the empty area, the gap, rearward facing, just like in the original installation. It probably doesn't make a huge difference since if you get water in there, it's a sealed bearing anyway, but just to keep it as common as possible with the OEM installation, we'll orient it like that. I'll take my new pulley with the same orientation as the old one. The gap is facing rearward, shoulder washer here, bolt going through the front, and I'm going to reinstall it just the way the old one was. So I got that bolt on there hand tight. You don't really need to do any more at this point. You want to keep it so that you can adjust it in and out. And actually, even that hand tight that I got it was too much. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit so that we can adjust tension in and out and get the belt back on. So the belt's back on. You want to make sure that the belt is sitting on all the grooves of all of the pulleys. For this belt, there's a pulley at the crank right there, which it's seated in, and then our idler pulley, which it's seated in, and then the power steering pump pulley, which looks good too. So now we can tighten this up and add tension back on the belt. So the criteria that I've heard for gauging when your belt is tight enough is that when you deflect it with one finger, it doesn't go farther than 1/8 of an inch for a short run, or 1/4 of an inch for a longer run. So I have this short little run here between the idler pulley and the power steering pump pulley, and you know, I'm pressing it with my index finger. It's probably not more than 1/8 of an inch. Basically, I just like to see that when I push it with one finger, it doesn't deflect very far. But of course, you don't want it like completely taut to where you can't deflect it at all, because then it's way too tight and it's wearing out the bearings faster than it should. So once you have your tension set correctly on the belt, you can tighten up the locking nut on the front of the pulley, and then you can torque to the torque specification for this that I found was 40 foot-pounds. So you can go ahead and torque to that. Okay, you can just double check your belt tension to make sure that tightening the locking nut didn't significantly change anything, and it still looks good. So now that that's all done, the only thing left to do is to secure the fan shroud back on the radiator with 2 bolts over there and 2 over there, and then secure this line back on the top of the fan shroud. One. You don't want to do these too tight because these are just holding plastic. Two. Three. Four. One. And two. Done. Finally, reinstall the negative cable on your battery. Now you want to start it up and listen for any odd sounds. If there's anything that sounds out of the ordinary, stop the engine.